in that when I was younger, at about 9, I was sexually assaulted by a female who was only a couple of years older than me. At the time, as a 9-year-old, you don't quite understand it. You don't, you go back to the feeling at the moment, and it's probably not right. But you've been told that you're just playing a game under the bed, and you don't know any different. Like at that stage, I don't know if it was because I had a beautiful sheltered childhood, but I didn't understand it. I didn't know what that was, and it wasn't until I grew up and I started applying the meanings to what actually happened. And so that was probably, I refer to that as like my first, I guess, moment of impact.
What is up, everyone? I am Lachlan Samuel, and this is the Open Up Podcast, the show where real people open up and share real stories of struggle. Good to go?
Yep. I was watching on the screen. Wow. Okay.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Open Up Podcast and episode 31 with Beth Banasik. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you responded quick, and we got around to actually doing this really quickly, so I'm super stoked.
That's good.
that I got to have you on, and especially for next week, which I think is Mental Health Week in WA. All right.
I believe it is. That's worked out well.
Yeah. And I think what I like about your story and why I'm excited to have you on is because you have two stories with two lessons that will resonate with most people.
Yeah.
One is a pretty heavy topic, but the lesson is something that applies to most people's lives in terms of looking back and figuring out who you are and how you can work towards your higher self or the better version of yourself.
Yeah, perfect.
I guess we'll jump right in. With childhood, one of your first story that you are going to share starts in childhood. Can you walk us through that story?
Yeah. So basically, I had a pretty great childhood. I'm the eldest of 4 girls. Lived in country WA,
Whereabouts?
It was Cambodia, so in the goldfields.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was great. You could play on the street and you weren't going to get run over by a car. My parents are still together. But yeah, a very happy childhood. And then I guess the first sort of memory I have was about 5 years old, when I had a lazy eye. So I still have a lazy eye. It's something that doesn't go away.
And how did that come about? Were you born with it, or?
Yeah, so it's not something that's like a trauma. Like you don't get hit in the head and have it. It's just that you're born with it.
Okay.
And then lots of people, it automatically corrects, but mine didn't. And then as you start going to school and having to read and that sort of thing, it becomes more evident. You're using your eyes to do, I guess, important things. And yeah, I started seeing doctors and I don't know what they're called, ophthalmologists or something like that.
Optometrists?
I probably saw a couple of those. I don't know. I don't know. I can't even remember who.
If you really want to know, guys, Google it.
Yeah. The people that sort out your eyes. But I had to wear an eye patch. So that was the first, I guess, therapy or sort of retraining. They try and retrain your brain. Because apart from the physical, one of your eyes sort of floating off, which is normally what it looks like.
Yep.
It's actually that your brain doesn't register the image from that eye that's floating off. So that's kind of why they call it lazy, is that your brain isn't registering it. And so the first, I guess, step that I had to go through was wearing an eye patch over my dominant eye, which is for a 5 or 6 year old girl is a bit confronting, even though I remember having like a skin coloured eye patch, and I was quite petite, so it's still weird, and it took me a long time to even sort of like share photos of me in that time, because I had a patch over my eye, and it's just unusual. And I guess while there's lots of great things about being in a country town, it also means that things like that don't happen very often.
Yes.
So it's very unusual. And it's not that people were like mean to me at school. Like I can't ever remember being particularly picked on because of it. But it was just like, oh yeah, she's the one with the eye patch, or she's just little comments that then.
So you knew that you were different.
Yeah, and that's it. It's just being different. Like at that age, you don't really know whether it's like a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just you're different to everyone else.
Yeah, that's hard, especially when you're trying at that age, when you're sort of left your parents and like modeling your parents' behaviour, and you're sort of starting to go into like needing that social acceptance from your peer groups.
Yeah.
That's pretty hard as well.
Yeah, and that's like, it's your first really, like you're trying to find friends and things like that. So being different is, I don't know whether you would say it was a struggle, but it's just different. When you don't want to be at that age, you don't want to be different. You just want to fit in.
And how long did you have to have that eye patch on for?
So it was year 2, I believe, that I had surgery to fix it. So it was, from about 5 to nearly 7 years old, I guess, I was wearing the eye patch.
Jeez.
And then I had surgery to fix the muscles around the eye so that they lined up aesthetically in it looks like my eyes are looking in the same direction. And then the hope is that automatically your brain starts picking up the image from that eye. Now, like 21 years down the track, my brain hasn't. So I still, can't see 3D, can't look down binoculars or a microscope, like a dual lens microscope, because the image just doesn't work in my head. So I have perfect eyesight in each eye, but my brain won't register both images at the same time.
Yeah.
And if I get tired, one eye gets tired before the other, so then I straight away have a lazy eye again.
Okay.
But that's
cool.
This is how it is.
I guess when you were younger, before you had that surgery and corrected it,
Mm-hmm.
do you understand, or did you have an understanding of how it was impacting you in terms of how you perceived yourself? Did it diminish your confidence at all?
Yeah, I think it I don't know whether you, like, at that age it's confidence as much. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know sort of what my place was.
Okay.
So I just floated a lot, I guess. And I remember having lots of groups of lots of great friends, and I was quite sporty, and I gave everything a go. But I think it was just because in the back of your mind, you know that there's something different, or that you perceive as different. So I'm sure lots of other kids had something different, but in your own head, you're like, oh no, I'm different to what I can see everyone else is. And so it leads to you sort of isolating yourself, I guess, while you feel like you need to find somewhere to fit in, and you can't, or you think that you can't.
That's a hard position to be in as a kid, because
Yeah.
it's one thing to assume that you're different.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it's the color of your skin. You think, oh, I'm different because I'm a little bit darker than someone else.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're being told by people,
Yeah.
like externally, you're being told that you are different. I think that's a totally different beast to tangle with.
Yeah, and it's I guess the kids are great, or like in that they don't they don't lie to you because they don't know how to lie.
Yeah.
So it's never like malicious in the way that they say anything, but they don't lie. So oh yeah, that's the chick with the eye patch.
Yeah.
Every day, that's because they don't know any different. So
Okay.
yeah.
And I guess when we go from the story to recovery and then the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
With you, it wasn't until later in life, I think you said beforehand, that you actually started to reflect on this with the help of a psych.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk us through
Yeah,
what happened with that? Like why you went and what you got out of it?
Yeah, so I obviously that was, I guess, the eye thing sort of finished at about 7, and it wasn't until I was 21, I think, was the first time that I actually went and saw a psych. And at that stage, it was for a whole heap of other, well, what I thought was other reasons.
Yeah.
Like depression, anxiety, those sorts of things, and that's why you, I guess, the tipping point is why you go and get help. But then as you work through, your story, you work backwards. You realize that little in the grand scheme of things, little things like that have a huge impact on the way that you see yourself growing up, which can lead to a whole array of experiences and thought patterns as you develop.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you're over that space from 5 to 7, 2 years of every day continually embedding in your subconscious that you are different and that you can't find a place, you're more than likely going to carry that until you actually deal with it.
Yeah.
That's what you did.
Yeah, that's it. Like they say that up to about 7, children are sponges, right? So they take everything in. So if every day that's what you're putting in your own head, then yeah, you've got to get to a point where you're going to have to deal with that at some point. Yeah.
So how did you, after now going to see the psych, thinking it was for something else, and then finally realizing, hold on, maybe there's something to do with this whole lazy eye and eye patch situation.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn throughout that process about how that eye patch affected you, or was there anything more to it?
It was, I think the main thing that I got out of it was that it was actually all in my head. It was all me. Like, children that age don't say things in a mean way on purpose. It was just the way that I was interpreting it and the story that I was telling myself around that, that was, I guess, in essence, sort of doing the damage to my self-worth. It wasn't anyone doing anything to me.
Yeah.
It was me doing it to me, which is, I guess the lesson in everything.
Well, in terms of not feeling like you fit in, not having a place, did you carry that, from looking back now, do you feel like you carried that throughout, I guess, your adolescence and then to that point where you go to see the psych? And if so, do you have any events or moments where you can actually picture, hold on, maybe this is the reason why I went through what I went through?
Yeah. I guess from there it's everything I did, I don't know whether it was specifically the eye patch or whether it was like that, the thought pattern that was then ingrained in me because of that. But it just led to constantly trying to find a place to fit in. So it was always wanting to please everyone, which is dangerous within itself.
Yeah.
Not wanting to sort of put a foot out of line, because you don't want to stand out. If you're telling yourself that you're already different when you feel like you're in the box and you feel like you're fitting in, then you just want to stay there. And that was probably my entire up until 20, like my entire teenage years of just like, I just want to fit in. I just want everyone to not notice me almost, I just want to be one of them.
Talking about the eye patch and from like 5 to 20 when you go see the psych, I guess you're talking about never really fitting in, but sort of molding yourself to try your best to fit in without anyone really like noticing you per se. If you were trying to do that, trying to fit in without really being noticed, do you ever felt like you could be yourself between 5 to 20 years old?
Not really. Like I think I was so focused on just fitting in and being, what society terms as right.
Yeah.
I didn't even know who I was. So at that stage, it wasn't that I was consciously fighting against me. It was that I didn't even know who I was to be fighting against.
Wow.
So you just feel lost. You just, it just doesn't feel like you fit.
Yeah.
It's not well, for me, I wasn't fighting against something. I was just not sure what was happening. So
that's just all you were used to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. And I guess fast forwarding to now, do you have a good understanding of who you actually are?
Yeah, I do. I feel I guess my journey has led to probably something that I would never have expected, in that now I consider myself a bit more spiritual, and like everyone in my family thinks I'm like woo woo, like hippie. But I feel at peace. I feel like I am able to quite quickly acknowledge things that don't gel with me, things that don't feel right, and I have the confidence and the self-worth to put my foot down and make sure that my journey or my path is the right way for me. So
that is so cool, and that is so far out the box, and it's amazing. So you've stopped trying to mold yourself to fit what other people want.
Yeah, and it's unusual, and it's still a weird feeling for me. And like I speak to one of my friends who she gets it a bit more, and she's just like, you sound like you're floating, and it is. It's almost surreal in that I know when whatever I'm doing feels right, and it flows perfectly. And then the moment that something doesn't feel right, I instantly am aware of it and can switch back. I step back, take time to get into what I would refer to as my heart space.
Yeah.
And get out of my head, back into my heart, and then reassess from there. So, and it's great.
That's super liberating.
Yeah, it is. And I wish that I could share it with everyone. I wish that everyone could feel like that, because it's something liberating and just beautiful to experience. And I know that there's lots of people that don't even know that it's possible to feel like that. They just keep going on their life, which is, everyone's got their own beautiful journey. So,
and an important part of getting to that state of mind or that space in the first place is actually looking back and seeing what's tripped you up over time and what what negative habits you've programmed into your mind.
Yeah. Yes, and let's not talk about the ridiculously long list of those.
I'm pretty sure we all have them.
Yes, that's right. But acknowledging them and being at peace with those, like, it's okay that I thought this about myself, and like forgiving myself for thinking that or for acting like that.
Well, it's hard.
Yeah, and it's liberating.
It is.
Being like, hey, yeah, okay, that probably wasn't a smart move, but it's okay. I did that, and I'm moving forward. I'm better for it. So just being, thankful for everything, even the things that you never thought you'd be able to be grateful for is huge.
That's super cool. It was a massive tangent, but I loved it. Now, in terms of the psychologist, was there anything else valuable that you got out of working with them? And would you recommend that to someone who's going through some inner turmoil?
So I saw a few psychologists.
Okay.
In that, my biggest advice to anyone who is looking at doing a psychologist or seeing a psychologist is always make sure you're doing it for you.
Okay.
So the first psych that I went and saw, it was essentially because I was having issues in my relationship, and he was like, go and see someone. You've got to work through this stuff.
Okay.
So I believe I didn't go for me. I went because he was telling me to.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make him happy.
Which is odd to tell one part of the relationship to go.
Yeah. And it was like, and I knew, I knew why it was. He had recognized that I needed to work through stuff that had happened in my life. So it was something that I had to do. But at that point in my journey, I wasn't going for me. So I was never going to get out of it what was intended.
Okay.
Because essentially it's going and talking to someone, but you can still tell them whatever story you want.
Exactly.
So if you're not going for the right reasons, if you're not going and are willing to open up and acknowledge that you're going to have to go through a lot. Like, it's probably going to hurt. It's probably going to be hard, and you're going to have to admit and face some things that you don't want to. There's really no point going. If you're not at that place, there's no point. You're not going to get anything out of it, and you're going to be one of the people that says, no, psychs are no good. You really have to. Like, the next time that I went and saw a different psych at that time, but it was me. I wanted to work through stuff, and I had recognized that this was probably the action that I needed to take.
Yeah.
And I got so much more out of it. It was me wanting to go for me.
Exactly.
And so that, yeah.
And that's really powerful. It's an important message too, because until you're actually ready to face what you're going through, it's not going to happen.
No.
No one can force you. It's like if you're upset and someone says, tell me why you're crying, and you genuinely don't know because you haven't taken time to internalize it and be introspective.
Yeah.
Then you're not going to be able to tell them, so it's not going to work with a psych either.
Yeah. It's exactly the same. It's not going to work if you're not at that point. And yeah, I truly believe that people will do it in their own time. People will come to it, but you can't force them to. You can't force them to acknowledge anything or to look at themselves a certain way. They have to be ready for it.
Yeah, I think if you are in a position where you think someone might need help like that, then you just need to, I guess, give them the information that someone like that can help, or provide them a book, something to read, and then just let them do it in their own time.
Yeah, I think with lots of my work since I guess that point in my journey, it's really evident that you just need to sort of hold space. You just need to be there for people. Yes, you can talk to me when you need to. Yes, like this is available. There's no judgment either way, but I'm here if you need it. But the more people try and force, and unfortunately, or I guess human nature tends to mean that people that love you most try and force you most to do these sorts of things, and it leads to not nice relationships, or
And
fights that are unnecessary.
I think a lot of the time too, or maybe half the time, people that love you most would still be pushing you in that direction out of selfishness, because of like insecurity, wanting everything to be good. And if something's not good with you in the relationship, maybe that means there's something wrong with me, so please go get it sorted out. And I'm a firm believer in, if you overcome someone else's challenges for them, like, you're robbing them of the opportunity to learn and grow from the lesson.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone's got their own lessons that they have to learn. Like, you can't do it for them. You can't do it for them. And the other thing, I guess, that comes up in that is the fear of other people. Like, people want you to go and get help because they're scared of what's going to happen if you don't. Or they're scared that they're not going to be able to handle it if something happens to you. So it's just the fear of the unknown, and all they know is go and get help. Go and talk to someone. Go do this. But that's really just their own sort of fear and insecurities coming into it.
I guess we can move on to the second story, which is a little heavier.
Yes.
But it's something that you've learnt from as well, and something that, like I said at the start, will resonate with most people anyway, with the lessons you've learnt. Did you want to talk us through that one? Yeah,
for sure. So I guess I would break it down into two parts, in that when I was younger, at about 9, I was sexually assaulted by a female who was only a couple of years older than me. At the time, as a 9-year-old, you don't quite understand it. You don't, you go back to the feeling at the moment, and it's probably not right. But you've been told that you're just playing a game under the bed, and you don't know any different. Like, at that stage, I don't know if it was because I had a beautiful sheltered childhood, but I didn't understand it. I didn't know what that was. And it wasn't until I grew up and I started applying the meanings to what actually happened. And so that was probably, I refer to that as like my first, I guess, moment of impact. That is what I call them. And then when I was 17, I was raped, which just reinforced the same, I guess, feelings of nothingness. Like, you're just worth jack shit, really. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here.
But you can go for gold.
But it just sort of reinforced it. But now I look at it as something completely different. So I
guess with both of those stories, there's probably something most people won't have to go through, but
I hope they don't. I really hope they don't.
Yeah, but like I said at the start, I resonate with you with the first bit, because I went through something similar, but I didn't really understand it at all. Like, I didn't understand how it would affect me until later on in life, when I could look back and think, why the hell am I acting this way? Why am I doing this? And then it comes back to something that you have no idea could have that sort of like far-reaching impact, like what you had with your eye patch. But did you have something similar as a result of the first one?
Yeah, I think I almost went into like shutdown,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. In that once I started realizing what it like what meanings could be applied to it, you know, you hit puberty and everyone's like the whole thing is about like sexuality and like what's going on with your body, and at that stage I wasn't even like aware of the meanings that could be applied to what had happened.
Okay.
And then as you get to like 12, 13, and you start hearing all these different things, like school, you know, media, everything, it all has like a connotation, I guess, or without even you realizing it or without even them doing it intentionally. It's like, okay, so you were sexually assaulted by a female. Does that mean that you're gay?
Yeah.
Like, and as a 12 or 13-year-old girl, you've got no idea. Like,
It's really confusing.
yeah, and it's like, well, maybe that is what's happening. Maybe that's, and then, oh, but I actually really like this boy, you know, and it's as someone who was already questioning where she fitted, the more that more meaning that I applied to it, it just meant I became even more lost with who I actually was, and it just, yeah, I guess led to shut down and even more trying to just act like I fitted in, you know,
Wow.
just more and more wanting to fit in.
That's a hard space to be in. To feel different, but to also, with the eye patch, but to also have this happen and now you're confused about your sexuality. That's a lot to deal with at that age. Did you realize how it was affecting you then?
No. Yeah, and you don't. Well, I definitely didn't. I didn't have any any background knowledge about how your thoughts even affect your feelings, or I guess we were sort of brought up Roman Catholic, right? So, you know, the answer is you go to church.
Yeah.
And that works for some people, and that's amazing. But I couldn't find my answers there. Like I couldn't find them at school. You can't really talk to your friends about it.
Yeah, of course.
Like by the time you realize the meanings that you're applying to it, you've already got so much shame around it, just from the stories that you're telling inside your head, that you don't want to tell anyone. You don't feel like you can share at all, because it's such a, yeah, the meaning that you have applied holds so much shame that it's paralyzing. Yeah.
Well, I think what I remember of my situation is sometimes I'd be in bed or I'd be doing something and I'd close my eyes and then I'd see like him, and I'd just think, man, like, am I gay or am I straight? Do I like girls? Do I like guys? I'm not quite sure. And then I'd get into this like spiral of hating myself because that happened. Did you have anything similar? Like you experienced confusion and shame, but
I don't know whether I like hated myself at that stage. I don't know whether I don't remember having huge flashbacks around it. there's definitely triggers in life that have come up since. Things like, I think I was mentioning to you before, putting your hand over my mouth. If anyone does that to me, then it's a trigger. It's that generates a flashback. That generates a huge amount of anxiety.
Okay, is that what happened?
Yeah,
during that one?
yeah. So, but that's really the only one that I can't remember having, I guess, flashbacks or recognition just doing everyday things. It was more when I then tried to step out of the box or find who I was or tried to fit in, where I started questioning everything. So I guess that's probably it.
Sorry, I'm going to keep relating this back to my situation,
No,
but I
that's-
haven't up until this point really met anyone who's been through something similar. So, up until the second time you'd encountered sexual assault, had you tried to then prove to yourself that you weren't gay or that you were worthy?
No, not in a sexual way. Okay, so when I was younger, it was obviously like it was a female, and I don't know how graphic you want to get, but it was just fingers. Yeah. So I had then not, I had been through stages of, not eating. I was a tall, skinny kid. I had constantly wanted to have a boyfriend, but was never the right person to have a boyfriend with. I was the floater at school. So I had lots of friends, but I didn't fit into a group. I went from one group to the next at lunchtime. And I hadn't tried any form of sexual validation. But that definitely changed after the second time. So, the rape when I was 17 was, I guess, pushed me towards the sexual side of the self-worth stuff. Before that, it was, I worked my ass off at school. So I was good at school. I was good at sports. I put all my energy into being good at lots of stuff. And then, when I was 17, it became, you're not at school anymore, so you don't get merit awards in life after that. And that was when I really turned to looking for the sexual sort of validation and certainty that no, this is what I wanted, I guess.
Okay. So. And like, I know you shared a document with me, like what you'd written about your story. Are you comfortable sharing what the story was at all?
Oh, yeah. So I was just at a friend's house, and it was the first time I'd ever touched alcohol.
Really?
Yeah. So, and I only had one, and it took me about 5 hours to get through it.
Oh my
and
God.
I remember everyone teasing me like it was a cruiser or something. Like, that's what it was at that stage. That's what everyone drank apparently. And I'd had one, and it had taken me all afternoon to get through it. So I wasn't drunk, or I wasn't like I hadn't had a huge night. I was at a friend's house, and I just went into the spare room to go to sleep. And I remember waking up and this guy being there. I still to this day don't know his name. I can't remember his name. I'm sure during the day I had called him something. I know that he had been there, but I don't know what his name was. And he was on top of me. I know that there's parts of it that I have blanked out. I remember saying no and pushing away quite a bit. And the most vivid memory I have is my head smacking against the wall. constantly. And that's still, you know, ever since then. It doesn't matter what situation I've been in. So after that event, I did lots of things that I attached a lot of shame to, which included sleeping with a lot of people that I was not in a relationship with, or I don't even know what it was. But even after that, when I was in a relationship, if I was making out with someone, if the top of my head got hit, I was instant anxiety attack, instant crying and a mess. That's the most vivid thing that I remember, and I don't know if that will ever go away.
Wow.
So yeah,
It's helpful though that you're aware of it now.
yeah, and I think that's part of the journey, right? Like being able to recognize things, and being able to make sure that if something like that does happen, that I know why, because then it's so much easier to bring yourself back and convince yourself that you're okay, that you are worthy, that this isn't happening again. If you know why you're reacting like that, then it makes it all easier.
Okay. So. And did you ever tell anyone about that up until the point where you decide to deal with it? I think you said you went to a psychologist for that as well?
So not until I guess like after that I had 2 or 3 years of you know partying, sleeping with lots of people, working. But I didn't feel anything. I didn't.
In terms of like emotions for people?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I completely shut down. I went through life and I was happy and I was joyful. I had a lot of fun. But I don't think I made any real connections. I didn't, and I definitely didn't know who I was at that stage. That was a very lost period of my life. And then I met Dan, who is, he was my partner for 5 years, and he's still a great friend of mine. But it wasn't until I was with him, and we'd been together for about, it was probably about a year, maybe 18 months, where that was the first time that I allowed myself to feel anything again.
Wow. That's a long time to go in a relationship.
Yeah, and that's
without feeling.
Yeah, and that's lots of things in our relationship didn't go well, and like it's been over for about 3 years now. But I still credit him with being the person who taught me how to feel again. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, he made it safe for me to feel. And that was huge for me. And that was when I then sort of went and got help because.
So with not wanting to have this connection, taking that long to really connect with your partner at the time, were you scared to open yourself up to someone, or did you not feel worthy of having someone's affection?
I think it was a bit of both, in that he it's funny in that I met him through the gym that I was working at, and he was, all the girls were always like, oh yeah, he's, that show Grey's Anatomy, how there was like a Dr. McDreamy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was studying medicine at the time, and all the girls would be like, oh yeah, McDreamy's in again. So he was like this, on a pedestal. He was. So I think for at least about 6 months, I still wasn't convinced that we were in a relationship. Like in my head, he would never want to be with me.
Oh, okay.
Like there's no way. And I remember probably about a month in, one of his friends I was talking to him on the phone, and he was like, yeah, so like you and Dan, and I was like, oh, what are we actually? He's like, yes, you're in a relationship. You guys really like each other, and I was like, oh, okay. Like it was just, I was so disconnected
Yeah.
that it didn't even register. Like it wasn't even like it was possible. And at that stage, I was actually living over east. So the first sort of 10 months of our relationship was long distance, and he was here in Perth and I was in Melbourne, which probably it had its positives and negatives in that I probably didn't have to confront it myself about the relationship as early as you ordinarily would, because we were on opposite sides of the country. But it also meant that I wasn't, it's not that I wasn't nice to him, but I just didn't know how to be in a relationship. I didn't know what it was. So I'd be like, oh yeah, I was talking to this guy at the gym today, and he'd be like, whoa, like, no, like, why are you telling me this? Why are you talking about this? Like, it was kind of a huge learning curve for me. And I guess he's 15 years older than I am. Okay. So he was, in his life, he was at a very different place, and I was just still lost and, had no idea what was going on. And he was probably the most patient person. I don't know anyone else who would have put up with me for that and stuck around. But then I made the decision to move back to Perth. And it was then that, everything sort of, you have to confront yourself then. Yep. You can't hide. We moved in together, and you live with someone, and you can't just escape and go back into your little bubble, because it's not fair on your partner either.
Exactly.
You have to do the hard work, and I was resistant to it. Like as I said before, the first psych was simply because Dan said that it would help, and at that stage I wanted him around no matter what, because he was the reason I was feeling again. He was.
So he sort of gave you like that self-worth back.
Yeah, and it turned into not a great self-worth, in that it was very reliant on him. So I moved back to Perth, but didn't connect with most of the friends that I had before I left, or and even just the other day. So I've been back for 6 years, and about 3 weeks ago, I got a message from someone who thought I was still living in Melbourne.
Wow.
And that was someone that I used to see at the gym every day. But I came back, and my entire world, apart from going to work, it was around Dan. I needed him to feel safe, to feel. So I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that.
Yeah. And that's hard too, especially when you're going through this learning curve, like you said, when you've just moved in. Things might be a little bit rocky. He wants you to go to a psychologist. Mm-hmm. If your validation for your own self-worth is wrapped up in one person, you're not going to want to give that up.
No.
Not at all.
No, and
and you're gonna begin to mold yourself into someone that they want.
Yeah, and I think that I didn't recognize it at the time. You never do. No, this is exactly what I want.
Yeah.
And your family and everyone's going, nah. But you're like, yeah, no, this is what I want. And so I didn't recognize it at the time, but we both admit it now that that's what was happening, in that Beth wasn't finding herself. Beth was finding her feet, but using Dan as a leaning pole, and that's, I, I guess it just wasn't meant to be. You know,
It was just meant to be a lesson for you.
It was an amazing lesson, and something that I don't think I would have got to where I am without that, in that I needed that step, you know, from no feeling, at least then I was feeling again.
Exactly.
And that meant that after, when the relationship did break down, it was we'd been together for about 5 years, and during that time I had seen a number of psychs, and I'd started working through things. Definitely hadn't worked through everything, but I had started, and so I was hyper aware of my shutdown period. So
After the
after I was
at
raped,
17?
yeah. So the point that I got to then, I guess, with my psych treatment, was that I recognized that that was a shutdown period, and I'd recognized that I had a heap of shame around what I did in that period,
Yeah.
but I hadn't accepted it.
Okay.
So when Dan and I split, I was so convinced that I wasn't allowed to go into shutdown. So I had to feel everything. I was determined to not go back to shut down no emotion Beth, because I didn't want to do those things that I now attached shame to.
That's brave.
It was
To
stupid.
feel it.
It was crazy, in that I hit depression again. Anxiety was at an all-time high. In the middle of the street, I would have an anxiety attack.
Wow.
I had a day that, this is again something that lots of people don't agree with, but Dan and I decided that we were going to be friends. We'd been friends before we were together, so we were going to make it work after. It meant that it was really messy, but it also meant that on the day where I was unable to breathe on the floor, having an anxiety attack, and I physically lost control of my bowels and everything,
Wow.
that I could call him. So he was also the one that was there for that. And that, I guess, support, in that I wasn't ready to, or I wasn't at a stage where I had enough self-worth to stand on my own. So that, I guess, helped me through that a little bit. In saying that, I ended up on antidepressants and that sort of thing.
It's amazing, though, that he was, I guess, respectful enough of you and valued you enough, even though you had split, that he could be there for you for that sort of stuff. Because I know most guys in that sort of position would just run.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that he didn't a lot.
That sounds like a lot to deal with.
Oh, it would have been, yeah, I can't even imagine what he was going through. And I know that sort of like after we split, he went on his own sort of, and now we are traveling completely different journeys. He's one of the ones that will tease me about being hippie and that sort of thing. But we still do have that mutual respect.
That's cool.
In that, yeah, that we've been through that and we got through it, and now we're our own people, which is amazing.
Cool. And so how did, I guess, going back to the psych in terms of how they helped you with what happened at 17, how did, like, looking back at what you went through then and then what you went through with the psych, do you have a better understanding of how they actually helped you through that period or helped you process it?
I credit the psych with,
if they did at all, sorry.
Yeah, no, I credit the psych with my awareness of how it would have affected me.
Okay.
I personally, I didn't get a lot of closure or a lot of, I guess,
So you didn't overcome it by going through the cycle.
no.
So they brought you to the awareness, and then obviously, like with Dan,
Mm-hmm.
you'd regain a sense of self-worth, which was missing because of
Mm-hmm.
that incident at 17. Now having this awareness, what did you go through yourself to actually come to terms with the fact that maybe that you could get over
Yeah.
that story?
I went through the most epic roller coaster in the entire world. That is the only way to put it. I went through, I guess, obviously anxiety. I had bouts of depression that I scared myself in that I went through probably about 6 months after Dan and I split, where I wouldn't drive along the freeway by myself in my car because I would get to Mount Henry Bridge and I wanted to drive off the edge. So I would always make sure that I had my dog or someone else in the car. Like I just didn't, because I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But I was at a place where I knew that I didn't know if I was strong enough to resist the urge if I was by myself.
Okay.
So yeah, I went through that. Again, it was my stubbornness to feel everything, in that I needed to feel that, and I needed to. I'd been working in the health and fitness industry, so I knew that if I got back into my routines, if I was eating healthy, if I was exercising, then I would be able to pull myself out.
Yeah.
And so I was just stubborn. I was so stubborn. But it nearly cost me everything. It nearly cost me my life. And then I got to a point where I decided that I should go to the doctor. I just wanted to feel baseline normal.
Yeah.
I wanted to not be stupid high, and I wanted to not want to die, and so I just wanted to feel baseline normal so that I could try and get routines back, so I could try and do things that I enjoyed.
Yeah. Because as much as it is important to let yourself feel that sort of emotion, so that we have like a reference point to gauge like what ecstasy feels like, and what the midpoint is in terms of emotion. It's, if you allow yourself to experience that sort of low vibration for too long, it's going to become habit.
Yeah. And it's, if you looked at sort of my life pattern during that time, I was coping in that I was going to work, but I was a casual, so I was doing random hours in a gym, and I would go in. It wasn't necessarily fulfilling work. It was just stuff that I could do.
Yeah.
And I think I went through a period of 12 months where I moved house 8 times.
Wow.
And that was just what I did. And I was like, oh, I'm just finding my feet. When really it was like Beth had no emotional control. Beth, had no idea what was going on.
Okay. And so you go see the doctor, and what happens next?
So I went on to antidepressants, and I was given what they call diazepam to help me sort of sleep as well if I needed it.
Yeah.
And I started taking that, always in my head being like, this is temporary. I need to, this is just so that I can get my routines back. This is just so I can get my life back.
Yeah.
Again, stubborn. um, but I did that. And then a whole heap of things just worked, you know. I think, I believe that once you sort of start changing your vibration, then the things around you change as well to meet, right? So I was trying to get back into my normal or perceived normal life. I was trying to be healthy again. I started doing some work with a animal rescue. So because I've always loved animals and dogs, right? So I did that, and it just volunteering, but it was just giving me something to do, giving me something that I loved.
And if you feel like you're providing value, that's like you're getting your validation and your self-worth from helping.
Yeah, that's it. It's like little puppies, they need you.
And they're always going to be wagging their tails.
That's it. They're always happy to see you. So I did things like that. And then it just happened that at this point, the universe gifted me with who I call now my angel, in that a friend of mine she was a mutual friend of mine and Dan's. She had a baby, and she needed someone to look after her a couple of hours a day while she was studying. And I was still casual all over the place work. So as a PT, normally in the middle of the day you don't have a lot to do.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I can do that. I'm sure that I can. She's like 8 months old or something she was at the time. And she gave me an appreciation for life that, as much as I had amazing friends and amazing family, I would never have got from them. I distinctly remember a day, this was probably 3 months after I'd started looking after her. There was like a avocado plant that they were growing on the floor. Avocado plants don't have a scent. They don't. It was literally just like a stick with a couple of leaves on the top. Yeah. But every morning she would go over and she would sniff it like it was the most beautiful plant in the world. And that like simple gratitude for life, appreciation for something really so simple that we would just walk past every day, just opened my eyes to all these amazing things that I would otherwise have not even recognized or applied any form of gratitude to. So then I started finding adventures for her to do, when it was me. We would always go to a different park because it would be a different swing or a different slide. Of course she wants to go to the zoo today. Yeah, right. It was Beth that wanted to go to the zoo. But, those sorts of things that then got me enjoying just everyday life, Going for a baby chino has never been more fun.
Yeah, I can second that.
Yeah. And it just, she became my reason for getting up, in that.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Something else to live for outside of yourself.
Yeah. And just opens your eyes to the simple things. Like, children have an amazing way of appreciating something really small, or finding joy in something that we don't even recognize. So if you just watch them, then the appreciation, the gratitude for what you've got is amazing.
That's really cool. I have the same thing with my daughter. Every time she sees like a little rainbow from a prism or something like that, she'll shout out it's a rainbow and stamp her little feet. Because she's so happy. When she sees an animal, she'll do the same. She'll just stamp her feet and squeal. Yeah. And that's the coolest thing.
It is, isn't it? It's something that as we grow up, sadly, I think we lose that. And then, that's been a lot of my journey, I guess, over the last sort of 18 months, is going back to that appreciation, going back to that gratitude that you have when everything is new and everything is amazing and awesome. You get so stuck in everyday life of like, oh, you got to pay the bills. You've got to go and get fuel. You've got to go to the grocery store, instead of being like, hey, I've got a car and I get to go and put fuel in it. I can go to the grocery store. I do have money to buy stuff, and I can buy whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing, just changing the perspective has been huge in my journey.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I had a moment like that the other night where I was just driving and there was like a sunset driving down Stock Road.
Mm-hmm.
Had my arm out the window and it was like warm. I was just like, oh man, this is real nice light.
Yeah.
And just like focusing on feeling the heat on my skin. I was just like, God damn it. I'm so grateful I actually get to feel this.
Yeah.
Like feel the wind on my skin while I'm driving.
Yeah. That awareness and being able to appreciate those moments is so good for your mindset. It's so freeing, and it's just like, I get to be here and I get to experience all these amazing things. And it does, it sounds cliche, but it does change your life.
Yeah.
Like,
and the more you allow yourself to step into being grateful, the more prevalent it'll become in terms of like a thought process.
Yeah, that's it. The more you practice it,
it's just repetition.
That's it. It's the circle of life, because like it started because of the repetition of the I don't fit in, I don't fit in, I don't fit
Exactly.
in. And now it's the I guess retraining of, no, this is amazing. I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for this.
And do you have a practice for gratefulness at all, gratitude?
Yeah, so I have daily gratitudes that I do.
Cool.
I meditate, and I have a list of I am statements that
Nice.
I do every day. So it's, everyone has something a little bit different, but mine are, they center me at the start of every day, and makes a world of difference.
That's super cool.
Just appreciating the moments that you do get to just sit.
Yeah,
I guess is
cool.
Huge.
So I guess with the eye patch story and both encounters you had with sexual assault, they weren't issues or traumatic events that you sort of worked out over the space of a couple of years. They're sort of still things that you're working through at the moment. Is that right? Or do you feel like you've worked through those in their entirety? Apart from the triggers, obviously.
Yeah, I don't believe they'll ever go away.
Yeah.
But I have got to a point where I have forgiven myself for everything that I did. I don't think I ever was at a point where I was really angry or really blamed the other people in the situations.
Yeah.
For me, it was always myself, and the blame and the guilt and the shame that I put on myself. And that was the biggest thing that I had to overcome. And I still have moments of like doubt or something where I pull myself up and I go, hold on, like, are you going to go back there again? Like, get out of that thought pattern.
Yeah.
But I'm at a place now where those moments of impact aren't something that I think about, aren't something that play on my mind or anything like that. I'm completely at peace with them. And I'm so grateful for the lessons that I learnt because of that. Yeah. And grateful for them, for those moments of impact. One of my great friends, he always says they happen for you. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that all these little things happened for me so that I could be here and where I am, and I could find peace at the end.
That's really cool. And how do you, or what do you think's helped you most in getting from a point where you shut down because of something like that, and then you go on this rampage, a sexual rampage? How do you go from the point where you shut down and you start having sex, I guess, with no intention of connection, to a point now where you're completely at peace with what's happened?
Jeez. Uh, a lot of looking back, a lot of acknowledging everything. It's not something that you can just sort of sweep under the carpet.
Which most people do.
Yeah, and I think that was probably one of the toughest lessons, in that it's not going to go away. The lump under the carpet just gets bigger and harder to go around. So really going back and working through it. I was fortunate enough to just, I guess, fall into a job at Happiness Co, which teaches you how to do that.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So by default, I was around those sort of skills and those tools every day, and just started applying them to my own life, and acknowledging what had happened, and what was happening on a daily basis. So I got to a point where I came off my medication, and I was scared that I wouldn't be able to control it, but then trusting myself and trusting the tools enough to know that if I was in a situation where I did feel anxious, I would know what to do, and I would know how to bring myself back. And that's, yeah, I guess, really going back and going through it all. Like you can't avoid it. You have to go through it to be able to move forward. And it sucks. Like, it's not an enjoyable process. But now I crave connection, and I crave growth, and like real connection.
That's really cool.
So that's
an amazing evolution, to go from what you encountered at 17, feeling no love, and then finally allowing yourself to feel that with Dan, being reliant with him, and then going through that spiral when you break up to being reliant on the medication, and then finally like really freeing yourself and allowing yourself to grow and become who you are now. It's awesome. It's nice to see.
Yeah, it's like, sometimes I'm still pinching myself, like, how did you get here? Like, and I blame it. Well, I don't blame it. I refer to other things, like I have essential oils that,
cool.
Like, I've got this, and so I'll be okay. I've got gratitude, so I'll be okay. You still sort of, I find myself being like, no, this is why I'm okay, but really, it's just me, and that's why I'm okay. It's because all these little bits, all these things that happened for me, all these things that I've learned, I've taken them all on, and
that's cool. And because you've given yourself the space to actually acknowledge what you've been through.
Yeah, and acknowledge and forgive. I guess I applied so much. Shame is always the thing that I go back to. In the thing that crippled me the most was the shame that I applied to everything that I did. And once you sort of let go of that and retell the story in your own head that, no, you did that and that's okay, but I forgive me for doing that.
Yeah.
And so then the shame goes away and you feel free, which
beautiful.
Is great.
Before we wrap up that story, 2 questions I have to ask. And when was the first time you ended up telling someone about either of those? And what were the barriers to actually getting to that point?
So the first time I spoke about the rape was to Dan. So that was at about 21, 20, yeah, it would have been about 21. Um, and that was just, I had been doing some reading, and I knew that there was a reason why I didn't feel worth. I guess I didn't feel any self-worth.
Yeah.
And I knew there was a reason, and that was, I in your selective siphoning, I guess, back of through your life, that was the thing that I was like, that must be what it is. That was a huge impact moment. That has to be the reason. And I didn't look any further than that.
Okay.
And so he was the first person that I told about it. And then the assault when I was younger, it wasn't until it was probably about a year later, and I was at a psych. And she just, as psychs are really good at doing, she just kept prodding. Like, no, like further back, come on. I know that you've got to do it. You've got to look at this. Keep going further back. What? And that was the first time. And then I remember going home to Dan after that and being like, wow, like I got to this today, and she made me say it out loud. And that was probably a big thing for me. Yep. In that you have all this stuff that you have in your head and you apply meanings to, and it's not until you actually say it out loud that then you can even look at sort of healing it, accepting it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. So. Well, were there any barriers for you apart from the shame?
It was shame. That was the biggest thing for anything that I'd done in my life, was the shame that I'd attached to it. Once I'd broken that down, once I guess disconnected the shame to anything that had happened or anything that I had done.
Yeah.
The acceptance and forgiveness came fairly easily after that. It's still like something that I don't. It's not a great topic. It's not something that's quite often easy to talk about. People, especially with people that you love or that care for you.
Yeah.
Because you want to look after them. Like, I know that I'm completely at peace with it, but I know that there's people in my family and things like that probably aren't at the same place, and I just have to respect that as well.
Exactly.
That this is my journey, and I'm at this place now, and everyone's not going to be like that, and that's okay.
Yeah, but you're at a point now where you're comfortable sharing it, and I'm grateful that you are, because you have a story that is powerful, that people will resonate with, that will, I guess, empower and encourage people to share their own stories. Like you said beforehand, with people coming up to you and actually sharing with you. Yeah,
and that's huge for me, in that I never, even as I was working through everything, I never really saw the point of my story.
Yeah.
But as you do share it and as you do tell people, it just giving them, I guess, the empowerment to acknowledge what they've been through is huge, and it's beautiful to see that happen around you.
That's awesome. Yeah. I guess a few questions before we wrap up entirely. What have you added to your life or removed from it that has improved the quality of it?
I have removed a lot of self-judgment or expectation. So I'm huge now on making sure or trying to not attach expectation to things. I think that it boxes you in a lot. Once you've got once you've got it in your head that something has to happen a certain way,
Yeah.
It can be quite restricting, and I think it puts shutters up, so you miss the amazing things in your peripheral. And things that I've added to my life of just gratitude, like gratitude for everything and every single person that comes into my life, and changing where I am, so, like
In terms of environment or
environment and people and like everything. If it doesn't feel right, I guess trusting
Cool.
that feeling.
So being
and
really
moving.
intuitive.
Yeah, and trusting that. Like I think people have that. It's tuning into it and allowing, I guess, the blind trust in that you know, where's going to be best for you,
Yeah.
what's going to be best.
And I think intuition is like a muscle. The more you tap into it and the more you trust it and use it, like it's like doing a rep every time you tap in.
Yeah.
And it's going to get stronger and stronger until one point is at a point where you are, where you can like trust it entirely and know that the direction you go with it is the right one.
Yeah. And like looking at my life, I literally a month and a bit ago left Happiness Co. and was probably the toughest decision I've ever made. Like having to tell one of your best friends in the world you don't want to work with him anymore, and not having anywhere else to go. Like it's not like I was leaving for a job that was going to pay me $1 million. I didn't have another job, but I just felt so much that I needed to leave and I needed to do something else.
Yeah.
And so I did it, and it was scary as hell. And some days I'm still like, what the hell? But that feeling's still there, and that peace that I know I'm doing the right thing is still there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty out of this world, but it's there, and I trust it completely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I guess with everything you've been through so far, how do you see yourself helping others?
Just showing that it's all okay. That everything that you go through and your reaction to that. I think most people have at least superficial understanding of if there's something that they feel happened to them, like an assault or something like that. Most people are like, that's okay. They can get to that point. But then being okay with their reaction or being okay with what they did afterwards, that was the biggest thing for me. I was okay with what happened to a certain point. It was then working through all the other stuff that I did afterwards, that I needed to work through, and just showing people that's okay and that's part of the process as well. But it's powerful. Worth it. Yeah, it's worth it in the end.
That's super powerful, and it's exciting to move into that sort of space.
Yeah.
To help people with that, because that's probably the biggest part of overcoming any sort of significant trauma or impact.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's like people don't. I don't believe people talk about it as much. People talk about the trauma. A lot, but what happens after that? Because quite often trauma people don't talk about for years afterwards, and it's the space in between that they need to also forgive themselves for. Yeah,
that's cool. I'm happy for you.
That's good.
Last one. If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard somewhere where you know it'd be seen all day and night, what would that be?
That's a tough one. Probably that there is no shame to anything that you do. So forgive yourself and move on.
Super cool.
It's probably what I would write.
Cool.
With a big smiley face
Yeah.
and a love heart at the end.
Emojis?
Definitely emojis. It would be emojis with colours.
Oh, cool. That's it. I just want to acknowledge you for actually coming here. Like, I think, did I message you yesterday to do this,
Yeah,
or
the day before. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But
Yeah.
thank you for actually coming over fairly quickly
No
to
problem.
do this and sharing it. I know you haven't shared it too often, so like I'm privileged to have you
Yeah.
share it with me
Thank
and
you
with
for
the people
opportunity.
listening.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah. As always, the universe perfectly aligned in everything that happened. And yeah, now we're here. So
So, where should I get people if they feel compelled to reach out to you? Facebook?
Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just Facebook. It's
Awesome.
probably the best thing. Yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
No probs. Oh.
Oh, jeez.